What is going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Wednesday Football Talk Show here with Ben Hall and my guy Trey Watson. For this episode, we're going to jump into the conference championship and our opinions on that, and then we're going to give a little bit of a quick expectation, I guess you could say, for the Super Bowl. But it'll be more Super Bowl stuff in next week's episode since we have the week off this week with the Pro Bowl and everything. And we're also going to get into a little bit of other NFL news and Maryland football news as well. So before we hop into this, how you doing today, Trey?
Doing good, man. Like you said, 2 weeks to the Super Bowl, a lot to talk about there, and a lot of hype involved. And then, obviously some off the field things and a lot of Maryland football news. So excited to jump into that too.
So for our first game, the Packers versus Buccaneers, this this was pretty crazy, a pretty crazy game just with the way the Packers offense played. The Buccaneers, Tom Brady threw three interceptions, but the Packers weren't able to capitalize off of any of them, and it kind of seemed like a Tom Brady playoff game where if you look at stats, he threw for three touchdowns, three interceptions, but if you watch the game, it seemed like Tom Brady had his way all game, except for late when Jair Alexander forced the two interceptions. But like right before halftime, that was the most Tom Brady play I've seen. Late in the half, thought about punting, 4th and 1, they go for it, and then hit a long touchdown and that really changed the whole game. Going into half down 2 scores, killed the Packers, and especially with the way their offense was playing, it was definitely tough to see Aaron Rodgers go out. And then a lot of people made a big deal about the comment he made or whatever in the post game that he won't be back in Green Bay. But I heard on another talk show earlier this week with Pat McAfee that he said that's just normal for him, and he's most likely going to be back. So I think the Packers could get back here next year, but I don't exactly know what it is they need to fix to get over that hump. But with the way Aaron Rodgers played this year, if he can play the same way next year, I think the Packers will be back. But then again, for the Bucs, the Bucs played so well. Leonard Fournette played really, really well. Probably his best game since he's played with Tampa Bay. Just breaking a lot of tackles and stuff like that. And then Chris Godwin stepped up big time for him, especially with the way Mike Evans played in the second half. Early he looked really good, and then the second half he had some drops. A lot of bad throws too. They weren't the best throws, but Evans usually catches those balls, and he had a pretty good amount of drops, which we don't really see out of Mike Evans as much. So, like I said, looking forward, the Bucs, they're in the Super Bowl. It'll be a home game for them, so it'll definitely be really exciting for them and their fans. In their first year in a while, going back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, man. I think overall the game was entertaining. It looked like it could get out of hand at one point, and then Packers snapped back and got into it. But there were a lot of big moments that affected the result of that game. I think one that hurt me personally was Savage not being able to get that pick on the deep ball to Godwin. That was a big play for one. I don't think anybody had scored at that point. And I mean, they ended up getting a touchdown out of that drive. I think the very next play with the big Fournette run. And that got the Bucs going, got them a lot of confidence. But that play basically saved Chris Godwin because the last couple of weeks he really just been playing poorly, a lot of drops, which is just uncharacteristic of him. Obviously, he played crazy good last year and was reliable most of this season, and had dropped the ball literally 2 plays before on an open slant route that would have been a first down. So that play really jump started him and got him back involved. Obviously you're playing against elite competition, but for Savage, I know that's a play he wants back, and it's a play he, pretty easily could have made. And it just would have impacted the game so heavily. But other than that, like the biggest difference in this part of the season, the playoffs for the Bucs, is their defense has taken advantage of opportunities. At times they'll give up big plays, which they've still been doing. But they've been great, forcing turnovers. It's been different guys literally every week. And the Bucs have been able to score off those turnovers, which on the other side, the Packers forced 3, in a really short time span in the second half and got really nothing of it. When you don't convert those into touchdowns, that hurts. The Packers were poor in the red zone, which is uncharacteristic of them and Aaron Rodgers, because that's where they had been literally unstoppable all year long. And he missed a couple open touchdowns in the end zone. On the same play where he missed Devontae Adams in the back of the end zone, Alan Lazard was wide open. So that one hurt, and that one was early on and could have closed that gap before it ever got started. But the play before the end of the half with Kevin King, man, it killed things for the Packers because they had shown flashes. Like I said, they had missed a couple opportunities, but they would have been right there. It would have been a 7-point game. And if they would have came out, got a stop there, got a 3-and-out, in the beginning of the second half, then they could have been in position to tie the game. And instead, they're down big and just put themselves in a deep hole and weren't able to capitalize when they needed to.
So now, before we get into the next game, I kind of want to see your opinion. So there was a lot of questions at the end of the game with what the Packers did, kicking the field goal, keeping it at still a touchdown game. You still need a touchdown to win and not giving Aaron Rodgers a chance on 4th and goal. So I kind of wanted to see, what you thought about that because, in my opinion, meanwhile, every like I said before, every NFL head coach knows way more than I do. But still, I don't see the reason in giving Tom Brady the ball with a chance to ice the clock already winning, in a playoff game. He's done it a million times before. So I didn't agree with it. And I just wanted to see, how you felt about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I'm a guy who wants to go down fighting. For one, someone as talented as Aaron Rodgers, and we've seen him make plays with legs before, he should have ran the ball in on 3rd down. If it's Tom on the other side and he's in that spot, I tell him to throw the ball because, he's just not fast. So, it's just different situations. But we've seen Aaron Rodgers make crazy plays with his legs before. And, from every angle I've seen, he had plenty of space. He had gotten JPP to hesitate, and he didn't have really anyone who could have stopped him because there were 3 guys around Devontae, and no way any of them are able to change direction and get there in time to stop him. So that part, that's really square one. I just think he tried to force it in there when he didn't have to, and he had an easier option. But, with the level of talent they had, even though they were playing poorly in the red zone that game, you got to give your guys a shot, man. You got the MVP at quarterback. You got arguably the number 1 receiver in the league, and you got, countless other weapons who are able to make a play. And you can dial anything up in that situation. You only need 7-8 yards, and it's for the game. Logistically, yeah, they had enough timeouts and they had the 2-minute warning, but the way the Bucs had been running the ball, they were, pretty physical all game, especially in the second half when Brady was throwing the picks. So it was just, bound for them to get the first downs and be able to bleed the clock out. You just want to go down fighting. You don't want to go down with your quarterback on the sideline and not even ever having a chance to see what happens.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But now moving on to our next game, the Bills-Chiefs. I took the Bills, and for some reason I thought the Bills would win. And early on, I was pretty confident. I'm like, up 9-0. They forced the Chiefs to punt. The Chiefs had the fumble at the goal line, and they capitalized off of it. So they were up 9-0. I don't know what happened. Patrick Mahomes happened. Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs coming from behind. That's what he does. But it was just crazy how quick, literally how quick it changed. All of a sudden they were up 14-9, then 21-9. And then right before the half, the Bills got a field goal. But I think the big thing for me in this game was the way the Bills were when they got to the Chiefs side of the field. They couldn't really capitalize. They had a few field goals, but to beat the Chiefs, you cannot kick field goals. Now, I know it's kind of weird to say, a lot of teams, points are points, but against the Chiefs score so many touchdowns, it doesn't even matter. So anytime you get in that red zone, and there were a couple of plays 4th and short where I thought the Bills would go for it, but they didn't. They ended up kicking a field goal. And, if they don't get it, they don't get any points. So it's kind of up in the air, but just overall, the Chiefs offense was way too much. When you have a tight end and a wide receiver like Kelsey and Hill, there's no stopping them. Literally, there's no stopping them. And your offense has to produce more points. You just have to put up a ton of points. And 24 points may be enough against some teams, but against the Chiefs, it will never be enough, especially in Arrowhead, just with the atmosphere that is and all that. It was a tough game for the Bills. All year I was kind of talking down on Josh Allen, and he really shut me up throughout the year. He didn't have the best game, but he didn't play that bad. He missed a few throws they probably like to have back, and it was his first conference championship game. So just like the Packers, I think the Bills will be back soon. And then another big factor for me was Stephon Diggs. Diggs had a pretty good game, but he just they shut him down just by doubling him. The deep ball wasn't there as much, and Josh Allen's had some struggles with the deep ball in his career. I think we saw it again against the Chiefs. So, I mean, I don't know. All of that's definitely not on Diggs or Allen, but it was definitely just tough to. If they shut down your number one receiver and one of the best receivers, and like I said, they didn't shut him down; they just limited him. And when you take a guy like Stephon Diggs out and he's not scoring touchdowns, it's going to be really tough to win a game on the road against the best team in the NFL. So, it was also pretty cool seeing the video. All the Bills players went into the locker room and Diggs watched the Chiefs celebrate on the field because Diggs knows he's going to be back in that situation and wants to win it. And Diggs also went to Maryland, like we've said. So he's one of the best receivers in the NFL no matter what. But like I said, Diggs, great receiver. And like I said, the Bills will definitely be back in this game sometime soon.
Yeah, man, I think, as far as Steph in the game wise, he had some decent numbers, but a lot of it came late. When it was too late, they were able to get him some chunk plays to pad the stats. But I mean, he had an amazing season, the best of his career. And, I don't know if people slept on him and thought like he was a one-hit wonder with the Minneapolis play in Minnesota, but I mean, he's been producing his whole career at a high level. And, he finally got a quarterback and is established as a true number one. And he showed that he can do amazing things. So he'll keep dominating, man. The offense will keep getting better. If they find a run game, watch out, because, that'll basically make them a complete offense. And they've got solid players on defense. But as far as the game, just no lead is comfortable around the Chiefs, especially in the playoffs, which they've shown the last couple of years. I mean, they literally start off in the hole just because it seems like, and it doesn't even matter. If you're a team going against the Chiefs, you got to know that 30 points, you have a chance to win, but that's like a starting point. And that's if you have a solid defense. If you have a bad defense, 30's not enough. We'll just, say that now. And I mean, that's what we saw. They weren't able to force any bad plays besides Mecole fumbling the ball. They weren't able to get anything out of Mahomes. He did whatever he wanted to do. They couldn't tackle Tyreek, which no one can. And Kelsey did everything that he's been doing all season long. It's just too hard to stop. They were, I think, like the first tandem in like 20-something years to have one playoff game where they get back, both of them get 100 yards. And then they're the first ever to do it in back-to-back playoff games. And they'll probably do it again in the Super Bowl just because they're both that caliber of weapon. It's just unfair having them on the field. And then, they have Mecole, who's really right behind Tyreek in terms of straight line speed, and they can give him the ball whenever they want. They just have too much. It's hard to stop. They've had guys out every playoff game, and it still doesn't matter because they can do whatever they want to do. And the Bills couldn't stop it.
So now, before we get into the Maryland news, the two main NFL topics we're going to talk about. The first one, Deshaun Watson and what's going on with him, and then the second, which we'll get into a little bit later, is the Steelers signing Dwayne Haskins. But first, for Deshaun Watson, like I said all year, I think he's right with Patrick Mahomes for the most talented quarterback. I think he actually might be the most talented quarterback because what he can do with his legs and his arm. But my question to you is, do you think he will be a Texan next year? Now, I personally think that he will, mainly because if you trade a guy like that, you have to get so much back. And there's so many different NFL reports and NFL people tweeting stuff out. So it's really hard to know what to believe. But like just me knowing what I know about the NFL, after giving up DeAndre Hopkins and seeing the way Houston reacted to that and the effect it had on the team, I understand if you guys want to rebuild, I guess, moving away, but you already have a quarterback who literally has shown he can do it all. He can do everything. He's really, really talented quarterback, and you just have to get him some pieces. Now, it's tough trading that pick for Tunsil, so you don't have the first or the second round pick, I don't believe. But still, just in my opinion, I personally believe that he will be a Texan next year, and he needs to be for that team.
Yeah, I mean, I think he needs to be for the Texans' sake, but I think the problem is that they've just dug themselves in a hole deeper than you could ever imagine with their only hope. I mean, yeah, they have J.J. Watt too, who's two-time Defensive Player of the Year, but he's in the latter part of his career. He's had injuries and all those things, and DNs can change games, but they don't carry franchises, and that's what Deshaun does. And I mean, he did it, with essentially no help, and they've just put themselves in the worst position. It'd be one thing. A lot of people say it'd be one thing if, they just hired a coach and did that stuff, and they didn't tell their quarterback, hey, we're going to involve you in these decisions. Once you say that, and then now you go back on what you said, you didn't have to say it, but you did. And, you chose to do that yourself, and then you don't uphold your end of that bargain. That just makes no sense. And you do it with literally your only hope. So who's to say, they can dig themselves out of that hole? They have no leverage, contract wise, because they signed him to this massive deal with a no trade clause. So basically he has all the power right now, which is extremely rare for NFL players. It's not like the NBA where guys basically just do what they want. James Harden plays bad for 2 weeks and says he wants to get out, and he gets out, and he goes exactly where he wants to go. So we'll see what happens. I feel like, though, at this point it's irreparable. He told him he wanted Bieniemy or to at least interview him, and they basically said no, and then interview him after the fact, after they've already made him mad, just because that doesn't do anything. That's too late. I saw that they asked for a second interview and for an interview with Leslie Frazier too, to try and appease him. But once you break trust and you do those things, especially with your one star player, it's just so hard to get back. Who's to say Deshaun just says, whatever, I'll go wherever else I want to go, and y'all figure it out. For once he's got the leverage, and at least, I'm happy for him that he has that. And either way, he's going to end up getting whatever he decides, it seems like.
So before we jump into the next NFL news, I just don't get at all why any team wouldn't be going for Bieniemy if they were, coachless. I understand that. I don't understand why any reason they wouldn't. He's proved what he can do with this offense previous years, and then this year it's more of that. And every game, he's running different plays. He's doing different stuff. So I don't know if they're worried about what the defense will do if you hire him, but Bieniemy to me is the guy that any team who doesn't have a coach should be getting. And then the fact that the quarterback who you guys signed, like you said, all that money, and for all that to now ignore him at first, and then all of a sudden when you realize he's pissed off, I'm going to actually go interview him. Like, what is that telling him, or what is that telling anybody else? Like, oh, all of a sudden now that's in the news line, in the headlines, that we want to go and act like we're trying to get him. And now I hear they're going after the Ravens passing coordinator and associate head coach, David Cullen, I think his name is. So like, there's so much, like I said earlier, there's so much different news, and I don't know what to believe, but there's verified guys who have insight and know a ton of stuff reporting this. So it's not like it's coming out from other people. And Deshaun Watson has liked Instagram posts and all that. It's serious that Deshaun Watson is pissed off, and the Texans are still, to this point, not, I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but out in the open, not doing anything to try to help that. So it just baffles me. And like I said, I think Eric Bieniemy should be the guy, and I want to see what you think about Bieniemy.
Yeah, I mean, he's proven himself to be one of the best coordinators or assistant coaches in the NFL. He played in the NFL. He's been around the game, basically his whole professional life, and he's been a coach of an extremely successful team. They pulled out every excuse in the book, man. They talked about, I think he was arrested or something when he was, a little younger, and something happened, but that's long gone, cleared, and he's paid his debts, and he's, perfectly fine now. They talk about, that he doesn't call plays, but then there's been 4 or 5, guru type head coaches who call plays. You could say he doesn't do anything with defense, but I mean, most head coaches are offensive or defensive oriented. There's not really any head coaches that just, head coach and don't do those things. That's just not the norm. They're one or the other. And that's why you have other coaches to fill those other spots. So they can pull out any excuse they want, man. I mean, most of the big media has talked about the fact that the black coaches in the NFL are just becoming a glaring issue. It's, I think, slightly more than 50% of the players are black, and there's 2 black head coaches in the league right now. So you would think we'd be past that in 2021, but I mean, then again, outside of football, you'd think we're past the things we are, and we aren't at all. So I guess it's kind of just a reflection of how society is right now, man. Things are rearing their head again that you didn't think would, and the head coaching situation in the NFL is just one of them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I agree 100%. And on top of it, like, this is just an example. Anthony Lynn, there were a lot of issues, I guess, people pointed at with, the way he ran the clock or whatever and stuff like that, his play clock issues. But for a guy like him who was given, not given, but he had a banged up roster, he gets fired so quick. And then Adam Gase, who, no shots at him or anything, probably one of the worst coaches of all time. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest, probably one of the worst coaches of all time to hold his job for as long as he did, and to continue to come out and say stupid stuff. Like you said, it just shows it's 2021 now. That's just reflecting on how society is as a whole, and that's just the way it is. It's sad, the sad truth, to be completely honest. But moving on to our next big thing, Dwayne Haskins signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And actually, I'll let you talk more about this, but I don't know if it was for 1 or 2 years, Matt Canada signing as the offensive coordinator of the Steelers. So he'll be actually coaching with Dwayne Haskins. So it's pretty cool to see a guy that you played for go from there and all the way up to an offensive coordinator job. And if he has success there, he could be looking at a head coaching job sometime soon. But first, for the Dwayne Haskins part, I seriously, I saw a bunch of Steelers fans getting pissed off about it, which is understandable because he's a little immature. But every young kid, and we've already talked about him before on this, every young kid has some issues. And if they're willing to, work on it and fix it, his talent level, the ceiling for him is high. Like we said, at Ohio State, I think he played 1 year or even a half year. He didn't play that much. And then, he was starting quarterback for the football team for 2 years. And, they let him go because there was, like we said, the maturity issues or whatever. But I think he has a legitimate shot to compete for the Steelers starting quarterback job. And that's also because of his talent, and also because Ben Roethlisberger just isn't the same Big Ben anymore. He's just not. But I seriously actually think Dwayne Haskins week 1 could be starting for the Steelers. That would make every Steelers fan pissed, I think, just because they all adore Ben Roethlisberger. But like I was saying, realistically, I think Dwayne Haskins might be more talented than Ben Roethlisberger right now at this point. He's a pocket passer who can move well. And like I said, if he handles the maturity issues off the field, which all NFL guys, or not all NFL guys have, but a lot of NFL guys have had before and have been dealt with and matured as they've grown on in the NFL, I really think he could be competing for this starting quarterback job in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the first guy to have, issues like that, and plenty of them have gone on to correct those issues and be successful. Part of that will be, did he land in the right environment, which remains to be seen. Pittsburgh has been a top tier organization for a really long time. Obviously, they have a well-respected and well-renowned head coach who can certainly help him out. And he comes into a team that's got a lot of really solid veteran guys who can maybe, help him out, walk him through some things, and just see if they can get the production out of the talent that he has, because he's certainly a talented quarterback. Everyone saw that. And just what happened in Washington was unfortunate, and it was disappointing. But as far as what will happen for them next year, that remains to be seen. Obviously, we saw Big Ben, and he didn't look like the old Ben Roethlisberger most of this season, and certainly not at the end. So, it depends on if he decides to move away from the game, then, that opens the door for Rudolph or Dwayne, or for them to draft someone else. But, I mean, if Ben stays, they're going to start him to begin with. Sometimes guys like him, especially, he's a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, and someone who's done so much for the Steelers. Sometimes, they overstay their welcome in terms of just there's a point where they're not the same guy anymore. And it's hard to see. It's hard to really comprehend because he's been so great for so long. So, don't know if that happens. We'll have to see. But if not, it certainly becomes a competition because, Mason Rudolph hasn't proven himself to be a top flight starting quarterback, or he would be either there or somewhere else. So it remains to be seen, But I think it's great for Coach Canada that he got that promotion. I mean, literally, he went from dealing with the situation we all dealt with at Maryland in his first year there, which was my only year there. So we were both only there for less than a calendar year. And then in 2019, he was like floating around, just kind of, I think, whatever they call analyst role. He was with me in Miami in training camp for a couple of weeks. And then I think that's where he landed with the Steelers and was doing some of that consulting there. And then this past season, quarterback coach, and in 1 year, he's offensive coordinator. So he brings some great things to the game. That's why they called him up to the NFL. That's why, he was bouncing around a bunch of colleges because teams wanted to get him and wanted him to implement their offense and to make it happen. And he's been successful basically everywhere he's been. Players love him. And, obviously the Pittsburgh organization loves him. And I'm sure they're going to get a lot out of him, and he's going to be extremely successful there.
So now, before we move on, I don't want to get too much into detail about this because it's not the best to hear, but I feel like we have to show this attention just because not as many things are. The story with Chad Wheeler, assaulting his girlfriend, and like I said, I don't want to get into many details because it's just so wrong and terrible. Like, we kind of touched on this before with the society nowadays, but it really frustrates me with, the way it was handled. The Seahawks waived him today, but like when everything happened, when the Ray Rice incident came out, when a lot of African-American incidents have came out, it was posted everywhere you could think. Like, everywhere you could think, it was on your phone. You were getting a million updates as soon as it happened, as soon as everything, like I said, as soon as everything came out, you got an update on your phone. But I was scrolling through TikTok, and hours after it happened, it came up on my phone. And then a day or two later is when ESPN announced it. So it just shows you the difference, like we said, in the society. But I really want to touch on this because what we said before, but it just frustrates me because how long it took for it to get out and everybody to know about it. And he needs to be held to just as high of a standard as everybody else does. And he should have been immediately, there's pictures of it. There's stuff like that. Like I said, I don't want to get into details because it's insane. You can search it up if you're watching this. You'll find it in a lot of places, but it's just straight up wrong the way that ESPN, Bleacher Report, all those certain sites, they're so quick to call out or report and post about other stuff that they'll get likes and retweets for. But it took them a day and a half or 2 days to, put this out and let other people see it.
Yeah, man, it's just terrible. People who do stuff like that, they belong in their own little group together, just of terrible people. And the fact that they're talking about, they waived him, like that's not enough. That's the type of guy like the NFL needs to make announcements like he's forever, done with professional football. Those people don't deserve to do anything. They deserve to go sit in jail, where people like them deserve to be. It's really just the only way I can say it. But I agree, man. It's the fact that it happened days ago. That's crazy to me because I just saw the story. I'm reading it and my mind is blown. But people should 100% be talking about this. It should be known because one, you don't put your hands on women at all. And someone, he's a professional athlete, a massive one at that.
Offensive
And
line.
he brutally beat her. And then they said that he was sitting there just assuming she was dead. Like, what? I mean, that's it. That's an insane story to hear. It hurts to hear, hurt for her and her family and stuff like that. But the fact that it took this long and now he's already out on bond, like, just thinking about that is just, I mean, it hurts. It hurts to think about that had to happen at all, and that it's not being addressed the way it should, just in any way.
And before we move on, the fact that he is out on bond is the issue. Like, some people who, I don't want to get too far away from football, but some people who get arrested for the dumbest thing, might not have the money to get on bond, but a guy who literally, a story that sounds fake, like it legitimately sounds fake, and a guy of his size, what he did to get out on bond the next day and be at his house living a life, is just, it's wrong. Like, it's so frustrating. But moving on into Maryland, Maryland received some bad news. Chance Campbell, the starting linebacker for the Terps, actually entered the transfer portal. And I read on Inside Maryland Sports, the VIP website or whatever, that like all throughout the offseason, I've been reading, all right, he's leaning towards coming back. Now I knew, because they reported it at one point, that he was either thinking about testing the draft or transferring. And I wasn't quite understanding why. I didn't know why, and I still don't, because it hasn't been reported. But then all of a sudden, it got to a point where they put out on that site that he was coming. It was 70 to 30% that he was coming back. So I thought that was a good chance he came back. And then yesterday, I believe, he puts it out that he is entering the transfer portal, which is a huge, major loss for Maryland. The defense this year they definitely improved as the season went on, but one person from week 1 to the end of the year that you could say played hard every single game and you always saw him making a play was Chance Campbell. He was always in the backfield. He was always making tackles. The Penn State game had his touchdown, the recovered fumble and a touchdown. He was always making plays. So this is definitely tough, a really tough pill to swallow for Maryland and Maryland fans.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's tough. Chance came in that summer, after I had just gotten there. So I got to see him fresh in, man. And he was one of those young dudes who kind of understood. He needed to learn. He was out there, working hard every day, trying to learn the system and, get acquainted with college football. And it seemed like he did so well. And he played well, the season before this, and really just came into his own this year. Like you said, from week 1 to the last game, he was making plays. He was literally everywhere on the field. He was our most reliable guy on defense, I'd say, and was just impacting the game. And you could tell he was playing with a lot of confidence. He knew what he was doing, and it looked like he'd be the leader of the defense, for the rest of his career. So it's tough to see, and it definitely hurts. I wouldn't say it came at a good time, because bad things are just bad, period. But fortunately for Maryland, it comes at a time where they, are coming off probably their best linebacker recruiting class that I've ever heard of, just in terms of bringing in quality young talent. The 5-star from Miami, bringing in the kid from Sandalwood. I don't remember his name right now. And then I'm pretty sure they brought in another linebacker from Maryland. So they're bringing in talented players. Fanaje got a lot of experience and looked good. And, there's talent there, so you don't have to worry as much. But anytime you lose a guy who was producing at that level, it hurts. But, hope the best for him in his career. Definitely a fan of his. He's extremely talented. And it'll be good to see what he can do with the rest of his career wherever he lands. I'm sure he's going to be extremely successful.
Yeah, definitely. And now before we wrap this up, the last thing for Maryland. So last year, Scotty, Montgomery, and Hoke were the offensive and defensive coordinator. But now this year they're moving on to Dan Enos. I don't think we didn't talk about this last week, I don't think, but they hired Dan Enos to be the offensive coordinator. who was the running back coach at Cincinnati. He was the quarterbacks coach at Alabama before, and he was also the offensive coordinator in Miami for a year before going to Cincinnati. So I think this will be a good hire in terms of recruiting. Most importantly, because supposedly he's gotten a really good amount of talented quarterbacks, and he plays a good role in recruiting, which Loxley has aced at Maryland and still incredible what he's done. But on the defensive coordinator, I'm not exactly sure where Maryland's going to go because it came out today that Coach Hoke would be the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, I believe. I'm pretty sure he's signing with the Falcons. So it'll be interesting to see where Coach Locks goes with this. I have no idea right now. I haven't seen any candidates or anything like that. And the spot's still out there. I know they switched wide receivers coaches and lost a special teams coordinator. And they lost a lot of coaches, which just shows you, how good of a coaching class Locks had last year and what he brought in. And also that Locks is looking for a little bit more out of the team, which is good to think about, that after a year that was considered good for Maryland football, just because of the past few years, it's good to see them, wanting to improve and upgrading in some areas for coaches. So like I said, I don't know where they're going to go for defensive coordinator, but offensive coordinator, I think they brought in a really good guy who will also help with Talia, and he coached Tua at Alabama.
For sure, man. I think, part of the college game, they were cycling, kids and recruits in and out, and they're also cycling coaches in and out. With Coach Hope going to the NFL, there's guys who have aspirations to go to the professional level. There's guys who want to, move up go from GAs to assistant coaches and assistant coaches to coordinators. So that happens every year, and that's not a surprise. It definitely shows that he's gotten a quality level of assistance, but at the same time, it hurts, having to constantly rebuild. The OC hire, it sounds good, like you said, as of right now. And obviously, Coach Locks has, his input in the offense anyway. So I don't think, there will be any drop off there. And hopefully there's just things to benefit from him coming in recruiting wise and as far as the offense. Defense, I didn't even realize that the DC, was going elsewhere today. So that's news. I honestly don't know where they'll lean. I don't know ties that Coach Loxley has. One that I'd like to see personally would be him pulling Matt Barnes away from Ohio State. Now, it'd probably take a good amount of money because right now he's the safeties and special teams coordinator right now, coach anyway. But, I don't know how many people know, but he called plays when I was at Maryland that year when everything happened, and because Coach Durkin was the play caller prior to that. So he left, and we had Andy Boo, we had Coach Barnes, and I forget the other coach's name, but it was his first time calling plays. It was his first time actually being the special teams play caller, and he did both. He did both in like his third year being an assistant coach, and did a great job, man. Our defense was competitive, and we, flew around, and he had us in positions to be successful and win in big games. That's why he got the job at Ohio State, and he's, had success there. Their special teams have been outstanding. And I'm pretty sure he's had a safety drafted each of the years he's been there, probably will this year too. I don't even know who they have. But I don't even know if he'd be interested. Well, actually, no. I assume he would because he's a Maryland guy. He, coaches with so much energy and every day talked about how much he loved and appreciated the opportunity to be a coach at Maryland. He'd be a perfect fit for that. It'd be a role he'd enjoy and would love. I don't know if Coach Loxley has any ties to him or even knows much about him. But that would be cool for me to see, and I would be excited for that.
So now that is it for this episode. Next week we will probably be having a guest on. I really appreciate you guys watching, and it's been a little bit quicker lately just because there haven't been as many games. But with not as many games, we're going to start jumping into some news and talk more Maryland football. So I really appreciate you guys watching, and please look out for our episode next week as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.